Derrin Hill, thank you for being here with us.
I'm so excited to, Bree. This is a real pleasure. It's fun to be here, and I love the podcast.
Good. I'm so glad. Thank you. I want to kick things off at the very beginning. Talk to us about your life, where you grew up, where you went to school, and how you got to be the person you are today.
Yeah, happy to do that, Bree. One of the things that just instantly comes to my mind when you shared that is, growing up as a Missouri farm boy. I had a great experience, wonderful parents, a great opportunity to learn and grow in an environment that was, I think, what they call free-range parenting today, where my parents just gave us lots of room to roam and a farm and animals and responsibility and some great educational experiences. I grew up in Missouri in a setting that most people would today consider to be in the heartland and also not well-to-do. So my parents worked very hard to provide a great life for us, and we did have a great life and a wonderful upbringing. But there was always enough, but never too much. And I'm super grateful for that. Taught me a lot of good things. My mom was a full-time mom, and spent her time trying to help teach us character and the kinds of things that make people good. And then my dad was also really good at that, but also, provided full-time for us and worked in financial services and insurance. And I had 5 incredible brothers and sisters. So the 6 of us as siblings were a total troop. We were best friends. When you live a mile away from the nearest kid, you get to be really good friends with your brothers and sisters.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So grew up on the farm.
Yes.
Which I imagine is you learned plenty of hard work ethic.
Yes, for sure.
Okay.
Yes.
And then you went to school.
Uh-huh.
So where did you go to school?
Well, growing up there, it was a very small rural school. In fact, our town, the next closest town, had 610 people in it. So, my entire grade had 19 people at that point. As I went into high school, it got a little bigger at a neighboring town of about 7,000 people. And then after that, I went to State Fair Community College, which is a great school. I had a wonderful experience at that school. I had actually gotten accepted to several other schools, including BYU, Brigham Young University, but didn't have the money to go. And so I went to the community college, and that was an awesome, great experience. I had teachers there who just really loved teaching and made learning fun. I remember my history teacher at State Fair Community College would come in once a week dressed up like a character from history. And we'd all get to guess who he was as he acted out that person's kind of narrative. So that was super cool. After serving mission from my church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Australia, I then returned and saved enough money to go to Brigham Young University, where I got my undergraduate degree in international marketing and business management. And then later I had the privilege of going to Duke and doing my MBA program. So that's kind of like my formalized education. But I actually think my real education has happened all throughout, from great parents, awesome friends, and just really devouring hundreds and thousands of books. I love to read.
I love that. And I agree with you. I think some of the best education comes from life itself.
Yes.
So from your life itself, what would be some of your favorite or most impactful lessons that you've learned?
Oh, wow. Okay, so that's... We're only here for like an hour.
I know.
So I guess I can share a few. One of the best life lessons that I've learned has come from my time working with other incredible people. And I've had the opportunity to work with just some stunning folks who have had a huge impact in my life. One of them is a person named Don Davidson. He was my first what you would call real boss, after my undergrad program in a corporate setting. And, he's an incredible man. He's grew up in New York with a New York accent and was living in California at the time, and brought me on as a fresh-faced, college grad into an opportunity to work for a big publisher, a global publisher. And he always made time to teach life's lessons in addition to like coaching on sales and coaching on, business applications and skills. And I always appreciated that. He would talk about the importance of how we treat our families. So I'll give you a simple example. When we were doing our onboarding training, he lived in La Jolla. It's a beautiful location, and there's a very nice hotel there at the beach. And we were there for a week and a half. And on the weekend, he said, have your families come and visit and stay at the hotel. And he invited them to his home, and his wife put on a wonderful dinner, and we all had just a lot of fun talking and getting to know each other and playing games. And that wasn't just a one-time thing. As we'd have annual conferences, he always included our families. And it was a great lesson because, so many people feel like there's this stark divide between work and personal life. And he taught me that actually it's all life. And at work, we can care about the other people that we work with in really like meaningful ways. And so that was just one example of what he did. And we ended up attending his kid's bar mitzvah and he came to my kids' baptisms, and we became fast friends. And even though, that was decades ago, when I go to San Diego, I still get together with him and have dinner, and he's just a wonderful person. So I love the lessons that he taught me about making sure that in business that I include my family and that I include the families of others in meaningful ways.
I love that. And I think it really demonstrates a crucial characteristic of leaders, which is care.
Yes.
And just caring for people as people in all aspects of their life, right? Because we do spend so much of our time at work, and it is a large portion of our life, which kind of brings me to our topic for today of being a leader within diversity and inclusion in the workplace, right? And I think right now we're stepping into an important era of adding another layer of care for our people within the workplace. So if it was you starting from ground zero, building a house of diversity and inclusion, what would you use as your foundation?
First of all, I love that you use a great visual for that. That's awesome. I do think that diversity and inclusion is a strong foundation to build on. One of the things that I've noticed as I've worked all across the United States in dozens of countries around the world and with people of every race, color, religion, gender, that there is beauty in that diversity. And frankly, there's strength. There's power in that diversity. And I'll share some examples of that, but let me hit your question first on the foundation. Sure. So I would build it on a foundation of diversity and inclusion that helps everyone understand that if you're a part of this organization, we're all brothers and sisters. Mm-hmm. Like, we're literally brothers and sisters. It doesn't matter the color of your skin. It doesn't matter, if you wear a skirt and high heels, or if you wear pants, or if you are a native of the country, or an immigrant, or if you happen to have a different set of beliefs than someone else, or different politics. Mm-hmm. Like, I think diversity and inclusion goes so far beyond just the legal definitions that are protected. I think it also includes diversity of thought. It includes diversity of experience. Mm-hmm. I want to have people who have just the biggest, broadest span of each one of those things possible, because then there's richness that comes from that. In one of our companies, Imagine Learning, we struggled to hire programmers who were women. And in fact, our entire dev team for the first few years were all men. And they did a great job. They're awesome people. They did wonderful work. But as soon as we focused, like really proactively focused on recruiting women into that role, like it wasn't an accident, but we really intentionally did that we started seeing incredible improvements in our product, because there was a different way of thinking. There was a broader set of ideas and possibilities that were brought to the meetings that just weren't brought up before, because there was so much sameness, and adding that differentness made a huge difference to the way that people looked at the design of an activity, or the way the reporting came across, or how the user experience felt. And so lots of different ways. But that would be the foundation, is to say, look, the foundation is it's purposeful, making sure that it actually happens and that it's planned. Secondly, making sure that everyone has a common understanding that all of us are brothers and sisters. And so as we do that, you kind of stop thinking about the things that divide you and you start thinking about the things that you can do together.
Yeah, and the things that unite you as well. And I think you touched on a really important piece of adding women to the table, in your case, the development team, right?
Yeah.
And it brought a new perspective and new voices and new ideas to the table, which I think really speaks to the importance of representation.
Yes.
Not only being represented in the room, but also representing a group of people for those watching, right? Can you speak to the importance of representation and how you've seen it impact businesses nationally and internationally? Because I know you have experience with both.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So representation is important not only for those, like it's not only important for in the company, but it's important for everyone else who has any touch point there. It's important for their customers. It's important for their shareholders. Frankly, it's important for just their kids or any general person who's looking in from the outside. Coming from a minority religion in a state that I grew up in a state where it was actually illegal to kill someone of my faith until I think 1976. I had a little bit of experience, just a little bit of a prism through which to look at what it meant to be an other, to not be included with the main group. And in no way does my experience compare in any way to some of the bigger challenges that other people face, but it was definitely enough for me to have sensitivity to that. And so, when I think about that representation, I think about my daughters. When my daughters see a Congress at the State of the Union, and I still remember one of them sitting there watching it with us and saying, "Why does everyone dress in black except for just a few that have colorful outfits?" I said, "Well, actually, those are women, and there are very few." And not long after that, that same daughter said, "I think I'd like to go serve in Congress at some point." And so I would have an opportunity to help increase the number of women that are there. And since then, she's had an opportunity to, interface with and get to know some of the congressional people that represent our area. And it's been wonderful to see the effect that it has as she meets with his chief of staff, who happens to be female. And she sees that. And then furthermore, I think about another example. There's a great executive who, at the time she was hired into our company, she was hired as a $10 an hour temp. Okay. And then became a clerk, I think at $12 an hour. And she was in a different department. And I remember watching her work, and it was always outstanding, like super impressive. And I asked my partner, who was her manager at the time, are you going to promote her? And he said, no, she's been a mom her whole life. She doesn't have the kind of work experience that I would promote her with. And so I asked him if I could hire her into my department. And he said, sure. So I put her in charge of events. And instantly, that entire department just elevated, lifted, grew, became better. And she was just stellar. And so literally within 6 months, promoted her to also then take on sales operations. And again, same pattern, just dynamic improvements, very impressive change. Her team was so excited to work with her, and she delivered. She delivered incredible results. I was then able to work with my other partners to help her join the executive team as the first non-founder female executive.
Incredible. And
she is, I think, one of the main reasons why our company was so successful. And I think back to just what had to happen there to make sure she had that opportunity. I believe that we should be, as a man, I should be a man-bassador for women.
Mm-hmm.
We should make sure that all people have an opportunity to serve, to grow, to excel, to lead,
Mm-hmm.
and without limit, all the way to any role that they want to achieve. But there are some real barriers with that. It took me 3 years to get her to pay parity because there were just challenges with that. Let's just put it that way. But we finally did. And in fact, she recently retired from that company. And when she retired, she was chief of staff, number 2 only to the CEO. And many of the women who work in that company had the opportunity to look up to her. Mm-hmm. And she mentored many of the women in the company to help them, and many of the men in the company, frankly. Yeah. And so I think that kind of representation is crucial. It's just like when we had President Obama become the first African-American president. I remember being with several of my African-American friends when that was announced, and just the pure, undeniable joy of seeing I could be that person. Mm-hmm. I could grow into that role. Someone else has done it, so can I. Right. Inspires generations.
It does. It's really inspiring to be able to see someone who looks like you or has a similar past or similar experiences go somewhere you never thought you could go, or reach heights you never thought you could reach. It really is a really important piece of development, personally, professionally, in all aspects.
It is.
This last year has slammed us with so many changes and emotions and things all across the board. And I know companies and organizations are feeling a lot of pressure to include D&I mm-hmm. into their company policies mm-hmm. and practices. However, they're also dealing with and trying to manage all of these other changes that they've experienced due to the economy or whatever else, right? So how can we encourage organizations to bump DE&I up to the top of their list of to-dos for policies to put in place?
Well, I love that description. And let me just say, hasn't it been wonderful?
It has.
Right? I mean, it's you have these pivotal moments in history where where the collective consciousness raises mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. to a new level. And I feel like that's what happened this last year.
I agree.
And so excited about that. And in terms of your question, how do we encourage companies to do diversity, equity, and inclusion? How do we do that and help them see that as as something that they should do? And you described that there's a lot of pressure on them to do it. It's so interesting to me because there shouldn't be pressure to do it. There should be excitement to do it. Right. Because all those other issues that have been raised, the economic struggles, mm-hmm. the closures of businesses, the challenges in education, all the other things that are taking place, diversity and inclusion helps solve those. Right. It helps bring to the table that diversity of thought that we talked about earlier, that diversity of experience mm-hmm. that raises all the ships in the harbor and gives us an opportunity to do better. I love the visual image there's a fence and you have 3 kids of different heights, and the tallest one can see over the fence. Mm-hmm. The next tallest one can't quite see over the fence, and the shortest one definitely can't see over the fence. And then in the next frame, it shows the same 3 students and above that, or children, and above that it says equality. Right. And each one of them are given a box to stand on that's the exact same size. And so they all stand on a box, and the boxes are all the same size. Well, now the tall one, who could already see over the fence, he's just taller.
He's got a great view.
Yes. And then the middle one, who couldn't see over the fence, now can barely see over the fence. And then the one who was shorter has the same size box, but still can't see over the fence. Right. That's equality. If you give everyone the same, that's what you end up with, is you still end up with these disadvantages, frankly, where not all the ships get raised in the harbor. Mm-hmm. And then you go to the last frame and it says equity. And equity is really a powerful concept if
Mm-hmm.
people understand it. So the tall child doesn't get a box. He can already see.
Right.
He's got a full view.
Yeah.
The middle child gets that one box that he had previously and can see over, and it's just fine as well. And then the third child, she gets 2 boxes.
Mm.
And so instead of giving that one to the other boy, the tall one, you give it to her. And now she can see over. And all of them have that equality of opportunity.
Right.
And I feel like most of my career, that's where I've been focused and working, is in creating that equity, which is not equal. It's equitable.
Yeah.
And so that's what I seek for. When I worked in South Central LA, or in the Bronx, or in South Chicago, I saw the clear differences in opportunity that people had. Or working overseas, I've been in many, many countries and seen the kind of challenges that people come up against, and there's no way to describe the vast differences in those opportunities. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like a world apart, and each of us have the opportunity to bridge that gap, and in our own sphere of influence, make sure that there are equity opportunities. In fact, you can't see it on the podcast, but I am wearing my equity sweatshirt. And this was actually made by a young man who's a great entrepreneur and wants to promote diversity and inclusion.
I love it. Let me know. I'll buy one.
I'll give you one.
Yes, I would love that. So where do we start with all of the? It feels like an overwhelming task,
Yes.
I think, for a lot of people. And you mentioned you've dedicated a large portion of your career to creating equitable opportunity.
Yes.
So where do we start? What advice would you give to other company leaders on where to begin?
Yeah, good. So I'll say 3 things on where to start. So the first thing is just start. Okay? Because when it is complex, when it is everywhere, and where it's somewhat overwhelming, most people just go into paralysis and they just hope someone else does it.
Right.
And so that's probably the most important one, is start, do something. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it's imperfect, even if it's awkward or clumsy, even if it doesn't turn out the way you want it to, just start. Because if you start now, and you start today, and then you start again tomorrow, and then you start again next week and next month in promoting diversity and inclusion, you'll succeed.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll succeed a lot. So that's the first thing. The second thing with diversity and inclusion is to realize we don't need to boil the ocean, to use that phrase. Let's start with what is close to us. Yeah. The opportunities that are right here, right now. Is there someone of color that that is in your neighborhood? Are they included?
Mm-hmm.
Do they get the invite to the company or to the community barbecue? Do they come? Do they feel welcome?
Right.
Do you have someone at work who perhaps comes from a category that someone would consider to be other? Whether it be sexual preference or gender or color, whatever it happens to be, or educational status.
Mm-hmm.
Do you reach out to them? Do they feel a part because of what you do?
Right.
I think about Eduardo in one of the companies that I was able to help co-found in the past. We had a janitor named Eduardo, great guy. He was actually in his 70s, and he just wanted to keep working. And so he applied to be the custodian of our building. When we hired him, we not only hired him and gave him a great job and really great pay, but and treated him with respect. But instead of having a CEO's reserved parking spot, we had a parking spot reserved for Eduardo.
I love that.
And that's what I think of when I think of where are those boxes stacked
Yeah.
for people to stand on. Each of us have the ability to do things like that. It was a simple thing. It was a small thing. But it made him feel completely included, and he was. So look around. Is there someone, like that $10 an hour clerk who you can do something
Mm-hmm.
for, or where you can just open an opportunity? I didn't do the work. She did it. I mean, she
Right.
was stellar.
Right.
I didn't have to do anything other than make sure there was an opportunity.
Right.
And so I think that's really, really crucial. And then lastly, is don't be shy. True social change happens when it catches fire. You know, you look at any of the times of social injustice, and you know they're all throughout history, whether it be religious minorities or racial minorities or women or whatever, it never was solved by just one person,
Right.
but it took each person doing their thing and then telling others how powerful that was and how important it was and how they should come along and try that.
Right.
You know, I was recently at the Library of Congress, and they just finished an incredible exhibition for the celebration of the 100-year centennial of women gaining the right to vote in America, in the United States. And I've been back to it 3 times now since then, and taken my daughters and made sure that they understood that, you know, the freedom that they enjoy today came from a variety of literally thousands of outstanding leaders and women who were just normal, everyday people.
Yeah.
And then in some cases, also men who were outstanding, who were supportive and helpful. They were man-bassadors for women's rights. And then those people brought along everyone else who were the majority, who weren't otherwise going to change a dang thing, you know?
Right.
And so that's what I would say is first, do something. Start. Secondly, do something in your sphere of influence. Don't feel like you have to go out and change the world, because if you change your area, you are changing the world, and you're changing someone's world. And then thirdly, get other people involved. Reach out, speak, talk, march, participate.
Over the last year, organizations have experienced an immense amount of change on all levels, be it economic or a call for change of policy, and it's probably an overwhelming time. So how do we engage in conversation with those who may feel skeptical or flat out just disagree with the call for a change and improvement in regards to D&I?
Yeah, that's a great question, because there obviously will be a diversity of thought. Right. I mean, there are those who clearly get it and are on board and are already there and acting. There are those that get it but are not yet acting. And then there are those who just, let's just say, they're behind.
Right.
Okay. And I love what Michelle Obama said, when they go low, we go high. And from my perspective, that's how you handle this. Mm-hmm. I love the example of Dr. King. He gave an incredible roadmap to anyone who wants to create change for diversity and inclusion that's just as applicable today as it was during the civil rights movement. He, number one, taught true principles. He taught what we've already talked about: care, love. Mm-hmm. He talked about equity. He made sure that whatever the audience, that they understood that he was coming from that place of love. Mm-hmm. And I think because of that, not everyone, but most people chose to listen. They may not have even agreed, but they chose to listen. Right. So I think that's one thing is we share the message in a way that makes it most likely that others will listen. And then secondly, we keep in mind that doesn't make our message less forceful. Right. Gandhi said, be the change in the world you hope to see. And then he showed that with peaceful protests and making sure that he didn't back down. He didn't stop. He didn't give in, but he made sure that there was change and that he was relentless in his peaceful quest for that change. And I think those are two great examples of that. I also think of Rosa Parks and her silent protest of just sitting and not being
Yeah.
moved. I had a chance recently to be in a house where she lived and just to learn more about her. And it was interesting just to see the way, this, what most people would consider to be an unassuming personality, could create the fulcrum for a
Yeah.
dramatic swing in the course of history. So I think we got to make sure that we talk to people, we act in ways that that don't give them evidence of, that don't give them a justifiable chance to be critical, okay, of our approach. Now they still might criticize our approach, but it's still not justifiable. So that's my first thing. And then secondly, we got to teach those true principles, like Martin Luther King taught, like many others taught. I love, I think his name was William Wilberforce. He was in England in the 1700s when slavery was still legal there. And he was in Parliament, and he devoted his life to ending slavery in the UK and in British Empire overall. And at great personal sacrifice, and to his reputation, to his fortune, to his standing, he did that, and he did it over and over again in that same manner, where he entreated others, he enticed others, he enveloped others to come and hear the true principles that he was sharing. And he didn't change everyone's minds, but he changed enough people's minds to where, with one vote difference, they voted to end slavery. One vote. And I think, well, what if he had been caustic or assaulting or offensive? He might have lost that one vote.
Right.
And so I think that's really crucial. Anytime you're standing on a high ground, keep the high ground.
Yeah.
And that's what Michelle Obama was talking about. When they go low, we go high. We don't go low with them. And it's what all of our moms taught us, right?
Yeah.
Just because someone else does something to you doesn't mean you do it back to them.
Take the high road.
You take the high road.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that's really crucial. And then once you've taught those true principles, you also lead by example. Like you show. And it doesn't have to be dramatic. You just show how that can happen. Or you give the folks who are listening at that point something that they can act on. And it might be small. It might be go down to downtown Provo and be at the march, and show support for your African American brothers and sisters, like me and my wife and my friends and my parents did. We want to make sure that we give something that's actionable. And one of the best actions that we can do in business is hire, promote, train, show respect for, elevate those who are around us, who in some other cases, someone else might overlook or might pass over. Make sure that we're creating those opportunities for everyone and not just for one group of people or one class.
Right.
Yeah.
One might argue that it's a lot easier to hire and promote and utilize and provide opportunity for underrepresented talent when you're a part of a large organization.
Oh, no.
But let's shift focus to startups.
Yes.
What can startups be doing when they have limited resources to still embrace, include, and provide opportunity for underrepresented talent?
Okay, I love this because it's such a misconception that only large companies can have diversity and inclusion. In fact, it can be a secret weapon for a small startup or for a smaller company. Most people don't know this, but 52% of all new companies are started by immigrants. 52%. Think about that. Job creation, right? I mean,
incredible.
It's huge.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things that we teach and promote here at RevRoad is now, at the start of your company, is where you set the fundamentals of your values, right? You demonstrate that in your foundation, as you said earlier, which I just love. So I'll share a couple of examples, if that's okay.
Please, yeah.
Here at RevRoad, we have a portfolio with 41 companies in our portfolio. Every quarter we add a few more. Right now, I think we're at about 35% of our companies are either female founded, female CEO, or female equality in their C-suite. That now in tech, the norm is less than 5%.
Right.
That
And to paint a picture, a majority of the RevRoad portfolio companies are in the tech industry.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Good clarification. And so you contrast that with that industry kind of average. That doesn't happen by accident. That happens by what we talked about earlier: purposeful inclusion, purposeful diversity, and it's not because you're checking an HR box at all. It's never that. It's not because you are focused on the optics. It's because you care about the incredible amount of value that brings to your company. Like, it's doing you a favor. It's not doing someone else a favor. Right? It's giving everyone an equitable opportunity, but it's helping your company with that. And so startups are not in any way, this is not something you wait for. This is something you do from the beginning. And same thing goes for racial equality. Same thing goes for gender equality, or for any other kind of classification of diversity that you would look at. You want to make sure that you're reaching out. And frankly, this is a great opportunity because in many, many cases, as startups, we're scrappy. We have to wear multiple hats.
Right.
You have to, you're often working for, non-industry standard pay, but you're taking that risk because you got some equity on the table.
Right.
And, you stop and you think about drivers for wealth and growth and progression. Equity is one of the biggest ones. And so many, many people who are minorities or in a minority status recognize the value that is. It's like a leapfrog opportunity for them if they do it right. And so that can be very attractive. So it's kind of like this really mutually attractive situation for a startup, because large companies aren't going to give away a chunk of equity, right, of any significance, but you can as a startup. So you actually have a competitive advantage to get diversity and inclusion as part of your foundation.
Right. I absolutely agree with that. And for those who do not know, RevRoad is a venture services firm who works with portfolio companies, startups within their portfolio to help them grow their businesses by providing them teams of services such as legal, marketing, mentoring, sales, all the things you really need to have your business run. So RevRoad is the lead sponsor of this podcast,
Amen.
Which I greatly appreciate.
We love it.
Tell me why. Why was that a good decision? Why was that the move RevRoad decided to make?
Well, it was super simple because this is part of our DNA. It's part of that foundation that you described. Anyone who has looked at our team or who has looked at our companies can see that. You look at the pool of talent that we draw from in our local area here, and our rate of diversity and inclusion is vastly improved over that. And that's a purposeful choice, and it's something that we constantly work at, talk about, value, and execute on. And so when we had the opportunity to do this, and especially since you were involved, Pre-Ray, who we just love and admire so much, it was an easy choice. And frankly, we believe. We're believers. And not just in word, but in deed. What we do, like we walk the walk. We're not perfect at it. I will say that. Like, we're still trying. And sometimes we don't get it quite right. Sometimes we have to nuance and nudge and, hear feedback and get better. Totally open to that. And, but definitely also know that we're way above the average there, and that we can be a force for good. We're a multiplier. Like, we can multiply that perspective, not just here, but in all of our portfolio companies, through all the public events that we do, and all the different people that we touch and interact with in the course of our work, whether it be through universities or through Silicon Slopes or through any of the other kinds of outreach that we do. In fact, next month, every month, I should say, we have RevRoad University on the first Thursday of the month at 11 a.m. And it's a public event that is free for anyone to attend, and it's It's one of those things we do to lift all the boats.
Right.
No one has to be a part of a portfolio company to come and participate in that. And we bring in outstanding speakers, and you host that.
I do.
And you host it so well.
Thank you.
And you interview outstanding individuals and teams of people who have started great companies and done incredible things. And you pull out of that conversation really fantastic principles for success. We're quite purposeful for that. So all of last year, we highlighted an incredible woman from history, recent or far past, who is an incredible leader who helped contribute to women getting the vote or to some other aspect of women's leadership. Next month, we'll be welcoming an incredible panel of people to come and talk about diversity and inclusion and their experience with it, and to celebrate Black History Month. So there are so many things that we can do as entrepreneurs, as business owners, as leaders, as team members. No matter what our role is, we can all do that, and even in a startup.
And I would add to that too, is one of the opportunities that Rev University provides is the networking opportunity afterwards, because a huge opportunity gap is network.
Yes.
And so the opportunity to come to an event that is free and have the opportunity to network with the speaker, the featured founder at the event, and everyone else in attendance is an incredible opportunity.
Absolutely. Can we jam just a little bit about
Yes.
networking? Okay, so I totally love what you just described. One of the things I've been really blessed to be able to do over the years is work with a variety of different groups, including Latino centric groups and African American centric groups in education, including the American Latino Association for School Educators, the National Association of Black School Educators. And that was one of the things that we found we could create a lot of help with, was giving them a networking opportunity at our events in some of our previous companies. And so that, if you had a student who wanted to move into education, they could meet with someone who was a superintendent who was already in that role, who happened to represent their own background.
Right.
Or whether it was a teacher who wanted to meet with someone that had gained a new district credential or some other kind of leadership role. And those kinds of networking opportunities often lead to some sort of a job in the future, and give those students that opportunity. And then also, I serve on the National Advisory Board for DECA, and it's a great organization of over 250,000 students around the country. And one of our big areas of focus is to make sure that diversity and inclusion is something that we represent throughout the entire value chain, of starting in high school, even junior high, all the way up through high school and into college and then beyond. And those networking opportunities that you just identified are something that anyone can do.
Absolutely. And just to call back to Review really quickly, for those who are in the Utah County or Salt Lake area, you can attend in person on the first Thursday of every month at RevRoad headquarters. And you can also watch live if you'd like to tune in virtually. RevRoad.com/live is where you will find that. Last question to kind of wrap up.
Yes.
You have been quoted saying that if you could spend the day with anyone, you would want to follow around Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate?
Sure. So there are lots of people I would love to follow around, okay? But when I look at people who have impacted the lives of literally billions of people, she is on that list, and she's high on that list. And one of the things I love about the example that she set is, we kind of talked about earlier that you've got to have an ability to be relatable to people that both share your beliefs and perspectives, and frankly, that don't. And at the same time, teach true principles and hold steady, hold your ground in what's right. And she's a great example of that. You look at her life and her example. I mean, she went from, having to fight her way into law school because she was a woman, to fight for respect in that role, and then to fight for respect in any courtroom over and over again, because at that point, to a large degree, it's a man's world today. It was really a man's world then.
Right.
And all those challenges that she went through in order to make it possible, not only for her to succeed, but then for her to help others succeed. She broke barrier after barrier after barrier herself, and then she cleared a path for others to follow. And regardless of whether you agree with all of her particular court rulings or judgments or perspectives, it doesn't matter. Like, I don't agree with all of her court rulings and perspectives. I can admire her as an individual, as a woman, as a leader, as an incredible person to look up to.
Yeah.
And one of the joys of my life is introducing my daughters to people like that. I've made a point of trying everything I can to give them opportunities to go and meet with extraordinary women who are in leadership, whether it be the superintendent of schools for St. Paul, Minnesota, or congressional leaders. I never got the chance to introduce my daughters to Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I always wanted to, but I made sure that they saw, RGB and some of the other great historical or document movies on her life. And she's one of my heroes.
I love that. I think that's beautiful. So Derrin, where can we find you? How can we connect with you?
Oh, many ways. You're welcome to always stop by RevRoad. Love to have you do that if you're in Provo, Utah. And you can find our address on the website, RevRoad.com. Mm-hmm. Also welcome you to reach out through LinkedIn and connect with me there. And you're also welcome to send an email to Derrin.Hill@RevRoad.com.
Well, Derrin Hill, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Bree. It's a real pleasure. Love working with you. And thank you for the work you're doing on this podcast.
Thank you.